Hello and welcome back once again to this neat little devlog where I show the current progress and state of Skyborn Chronicles, an indie steampunk adventure I'm currently working on. Last time I showed a brief overview of the whole project and a bit more in detail how the first big feature of the game is coming to life, the airship. This is all about bringing this ship to life, which means the basic flight mechanics as well as a first simple docking feature to dock and take off at predefined points. Before we start, let's appreciate this short montage I put together of the ship in action. Since I had no experience in making a pawn in Unreal Engine, I first started by doing some research on the internet. I quickly found this video by a channel called UE4 Poseidon that provides a tutorial series on how to build a flyable airship from ground up. Since this video here is not a tutorial either, I will now show a short overview of the things I had to do following Poseidon's tutorial to get the basic movement mechanics working. This is the main event graph for the pawn. The basic idea is to have so-called health variables, which determine if a specific action, forward, right or up, is currently pressed or not. These then get interpolated to a current value by delta time to provide a small transition for these health amounts. All values work by pressing a button or a gameplay axis equivalent which is set up in the project input settings. On each event tick, Blueprint sets the rotor speeds according to the current velocity in forward direction and according to the right health amount. This way the rotors move at a specific speed dependent rotation and also more on the left or right side depending on the current turn rate. The actual movement of the ship is done by using a floating pawn movement component. This is one point where I had to deviate from the tutorial and find out how to implement this by quite some trial and error. In the tutorial the ship is transitioned directly, which caused all kinds of problems. I then found out that it would be better to use the movement component. With this component the ship does not move by any physics constraints, but the whole movement is abstracted and made more manageable. The movement here is split up for the three held variables. One for up-down movement, one for side movement and the last one for going forwards and backwards. Mainly the add movement input node of the movement component is then used with some small additions and checks to get the airship where it should move according to the current player input. The ship gets also a small rotation and side movement added while turning to get a more realistic look. For going up and down, the ship makes a small rotation pointing its nose up and down. Camera movement works by using the Add Controller input nodes in all needed axes. This node enables the currently possessed pawn to get the camera control from the player controller. The view is reset back to the default camera rotation if no camera change was done in a specific time span. This gets checked on each tick and simply resets the camera using a timeline and a rotator lap function. Having a flyable airship makes more fun if the player is even able to fly it, doesn't it? So to have this option, I used a simple collision box around the ship helm that is placed on the upper floor of the ship. Once the player overlaps with this box, an interaction prompt is shown, and by pressing the interact key, which is E for now, the player controller possesses the ship and attaches the third-person pawn to a socket defined on the ship model. After unpossessing, the third-person character is detached again and possessed by the player. I had to disable the collision for the third-person pawn while the airship is possessed to avoid collision problems. In order to have the update events working while not possessed by the player controller, an AI controller is spawned for the airship, which is done by calling the spawn default controller node. I moved a part of the whole processing functionality to functions on the airship pawn to avoid getting the player controller blueprint more overloaded than it already is. The docking mechanic took me quite some time to build. This is mainly used to park your ship at defined ports and leave or enter the airship there. This is needed for the player to traverse the game world and to reach old and new locations. The basic idea is that the port is a separate actor which provides a collision sphere and a gangway model. Once the ship is overlapping the sphere, a second prompt is shown with an action to press for docking and undocking. I will keep this part short to not get this video lengthy. Basically, I ran into several problems, including the double collision of the third person pawn as well as the airship. Also, the widget to dock caused some headache, since I had to check if the player is even possessing the ship currently to avoid random transitions of the ship while no one is piloting it but pressing the dock button. After all, I got this working so far as shown here. There's also a nice camera fade out when the ship is docked and the gangway is animated once undocking. This is the end of devlog number 2 for Skyborn Chronicles. In the next episodes I will tackle the main character for the game and start with the first gameplay elements on land, including talking to NPCs, a simple fighting mechanic and a way to explore the game world for dungeons and loot. I hope you enjoyed this devlog. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please consider to like, comment and subscribe to show me that you're interested in my small indie project. Thanks and see you in the next one.